All right, so by now you should have these questions on the board written down. Make sure you guys answer the questions according to the video, please.
The 5th of October. Dawn breaks to the furious ringing of bells. Women gather to protest against the shortage of bread. And now fear of the approaching troops mixes with fury at the news of the king's offensive party. Soon thousands are marching to Versailles, pikes in hand. The women are taking their grievances to the king.
The core of the crowd was made up of the famous poissardes, the fearsome fish ladies of the central markets, who were known for their brawny build and their fearlessness. They were equipped with large knives for scaling fish. They were hugely muscular because they carted boxes. You didn't want to tangle with these ladies.
These are women of the poor quarters. These are poor women which are affected by the increased price of bread, by the scarcity of products, who suddenly begin to realize that they must act. It is quite extraordinary how these ordinary women, probably most of them couldn't even write their name, suddenly act as the protagonists of the historical process.
At the palace, word of the approaching crowd of angry women reaches the Queen's chambers. Legend has it that it is at this moment that Marie Antoinette utters the most famous line she never said.
Marie Antoinette did not say, "Let them eat cake." That is a myth. Marie Antoinette, unfortunately, probably never even noticed the poor people of her country long enough to make such a statement.
As the mob of women gather outside the gates, Louis understands the revolution can no longer be ignored. It is being brought to his front door. He agrees to sign the Declaration of the Rights of Man, but the crowd continues to grow throughout the night. By morning, 20,000 people are camped outside the palace. To close the centuries of distance between the king and his subjects, the angry mass demands that the king and queen move to Paris. Typically, Louis prevaricates. His hesitation would provoke a fury in the crowd and put the lives of the royal family in grave danger.
When they don't get instant compliance with what they want, it really looks as if they're going to massacre the Queen.
The mob break into the palace, screaming for the blood of the Queen. They massacre guards, decapitate them, and stick their heads on pikes.
They were like banshees screaming throughout the palace, "Give me her entrails, give me her head, I want a leg, I want an arm." I think that if they had grown so frenzied that if they had encountered her, they probably would have torn her to pieces.
Terrified for her life, Marie Antoinette escapes to Louis's apartments, only moments before the women break into her chambers and tear her bed to shreds. The king and queen are now trapped by the mob and at its mercy.
The only way that women can be pacified is for the royal family to agree to go to Paris, because once they're there in Paris, then they can ultimately be made to do what the people of Paris want.
Please answer the questions for me based off the video.
Dawn breaks to the furious ringing of bells.
What was the Women's March? What did Louis try to do to pacify the march? What was the ultimate result of the Women's March? What's up? Oh, sorry. All right, my bad.
Soon thousands are marching to Versailles, pikes in hand. The women are taking their grievances to the king. The
core of the crowd was made up of the famous poissardes, the fearsome fish ladies of the central markets, who were known for their brawny build and their fearlessness. They were equipped with large knives for scaling fish. They were hugely muscular because they carted boxes. You didn't want to tangle with these ladies.
These are women of the poor quarters. These are poor women which are affected by the increased price of bread, by the scarcity of products, who suddenly begin to realize that they must act. It is quite extraordinary how these ordinary women, probably most of them couldn't even write their name, suddenly act as the protagonists of the historical process.
At the palace, word of the approaching crowd of angry women reaches the Queen's chambers. Legend has it that it is at this moment that Marie Antoinette utters the most famous line she never said.
Marie Antoinette did not say, "Let them eat cake." That is a myth. Marie Antoinette, unfortunately, probably never even noticed the poor people of her country long enough to make such a statement.
As the mob of women gather outside the gates, Louis understands the revolution can no longer be ignored. It is being brought to his front door. He agrees to sign a declaration of the rights of man, but the crowd continues to grow throughout the night. By morning, 20,000 people are camped outside the palace. To close the centuries of distance between the king and his subjects, the angry mass demands that the king and queen move to Paris. Typically, Louis prevaricates. His hesitation would provoke a fury in the crowd and put the lives of the royal family in grave danger.
When they don't get instant compliance with what they want, it really looks as if they're going to massacre the Queen.
The mob break into the palace, screaming for the blood of the queen. They massacre guards, decapitate them, and stick their heads on pikes.
They were like banshees screaming throughout the palace, give me her entrails, give me her head, I want a leg, I want an arm. I think that if they had grown so frenzied that if they had encountered her, they probably would have torn her to pieces.
Terrified for her life, Marie Antoinette escapes to Louis's apartments, only moments before the women break into her chambers and tear her bed to shreds. The king and
All right, Kennedy. Kennedy, what was the Women's March?
Wasn't it like the poor women were trying to get more like rights, freedom?
Yes, but what was it very specifically? Was what are you doing?
They broke into the Queen's house, I think. Castle?
Yeah. So, as you guys learned about last week, right? King Louis is not. He is going to try and stop the National Assembly from convening so that they cannot create a constitution, right? A new constitution. To get the king to sign on to his new constitution, right? The women of Paris is going to march onto the Palace of Versailles, which is the king's palace, not the queen's. So they're getting what they're doing here, right? Is they're trying to force the king to sign this new constitution, trying to force the king to sign a new constitution. So next one, what did Louis try to do to pacify the marchers? Carter. Oh, sorry. Say that a little bit louder, please. Yeah, he agreed to sign a Declaration of Man, right? So Louis XVI, if anything, the guy loves his family, right? Is actually a very weird thing for this time period. It's for royalty or even people in general to actually be in love with their wives and actually have actual affection for their children and so forth, especially when it comes to royalty. And with Louis XVI, he really, really, really cares about the safety of his family, right? He doesn't want them to get harmed. Were the women very specifically trying to go after Marie Antoinette when they invaded into the palace? I got to hear your answer. What was that?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were, right? They were very specifically going after Marie Antoinette. Like I said, the people of France really, really, really hated Marie Antoinette, mainly because she was German, and they kind of blamed all their issues onto her, right? So Louis XVI doesn't want any of his family members to be killed, and so he agrees to sign the Declaration of the Rights of Man, which we all read through last Friday. So last one. What was the ultimate result of the Women's March? Ethan, what was the ultimate result of the Women's March? I'm sorry, what was that?
Not really sure. Really.
They said right at the end, they forced the king to go back where?
I don't know.
You go up and out.
Turn open.
Where did they force the king to go back to? What was that? Well, he was already in France. Paris, yes, Paris. They forced him to go back to Paris, right? They're going to force him to go back to Paris because he's going to be a hostage there, right? He's going to be a hostage. They're forcing him to go back to Paris so that they can have under control and so that they can know if he's going to sign this deal or not, right? And basically, they're going to force him to do this by keeping him hostage. So keep in mind, right, that before we get to this point here, you're going to have the tennis court oath, where they're going to make an oath to constantly meet every single day to create a new constitution for France, right? And this is trying to be stopped by Louis XVI. Because Louis XVI ordered military to stand guard outside of Paris itself, the people are going to assume that he's trying to attack him, and they're going to attack the Bastille for weapons and things like that, right? This is the official start of the French Revolution. Bastille Day, May 13th, I believe. It might be a different day. Is literally their Independence Day, their 4th of July. It's comparable to our July 4th and so forth, right? So this is when the French Revolution starts getting extremely violent, right? Like I said, they draw and quarter several people, they're replacing guys, guys on pikes, and so forth, and so on, right? During this time period, we get the Declaration of Rights of Man and Declaration of Rights of Women. That's going to come about asking for redress, asking for the king to basically give them relief from taxes, to give taxes to everybody, to try and fix their financial issues, right? And that's going to coalesce with the Women's March, which there was a very famous set of marches in 2016 that was protest against Donald Trump's presidency, that they took the same name, Women's March, from. So Louis XVI is always going to refuse to accept the National Assembly. Women carrying broomsticks, lances, and so forth are going to attack his palace, and they're going to force them to return back to Paris. I need you guys to get these two bullet points right here for me, please. And get that last part down here for me. Ooh, I forgot to.
Actions could have an impact on not just not internal.
What happened, Harry? My superior, silly.
All right. So, so the Constitution of 1791 is going to be set up as a limited monarchy, just like England, right? Where they're still going to have King Louis XVI. Except he's going to have limited he's going to have limited powers. Those powers can be shared with a parliament system, just like most of your democracies today. There is said that only men over 25 who paid a specific amount of taxes could vote. This is very similar to how the United States was set up, right? There wasn't a full, the United States didn't start off as a full democracy, right? Only people who own property or paid so much in taxes can actually vote and so on until you get to 1880s. And then during this process, Louis XVI is going to try to flee from France, right? He's going to dress up in drag, dress up as a woman, and him and his sons and so forth, right? And they're going to try to flee by carriage out of France into Austria, basically. He's going to be recognized he's going to be eventually recognized at a way station because the soldiers and the people who's working at this shop, for the most part, basically recognize his face from their money, right? Because his face is plastered over all their money and so forth. So he's going to be caught, taken back to Paris, and then prepared to be executed for treason because they're going to assume that because he's trying to run away, right, trying to flee France, that basically he is going to get either a German state like Prussia or England or some other place like that to raise troops and then come back in to take full power. So we're going to watch this clip, right? This clip is the execution of Louis XVI. For the most part, Louis XVI up to this part have worked after being taken from Versailles to Paris. He has, for the most part, worked to meet the demands of the people and so forth, right? But unfortunately, right, you know, when he tries to run away, that ruins their relationships.
Demeure, innocent de tous les crimes dont on m'accuse. Je pardonne à ceux qui sont coupables de ma mort. Et je prie Dieu pour que le sang que vous allez répandre ne retombe jamais sur la France.
Basically, he was asking for them to forgive him, that he tried to do everything for France, right? But they didn't really care. All right. So the people killed their king, right? The people killed their king, and this causes ripples throughout the rest of Europe. Right, you just don't kill a king without there being consequences. European leaders feared revolution would spread from near right. Austria and Prussia, especially, very authoritarian states, threatened war or return Louis XVI back to power. This is obviously a little bit before he was killed. But basically, the Legislative Assembly is going to declare war on Austria, right? However, there's a very big issue. They're not prepared to fight in this war exactly this yet. Yeah, not prepared to fight exactly this yet, right? And panic is going to start to spread, and people are going to start looking for scapegoats, right? So, basically what's going to happen is that protests are going to start to happen again after the death of Louis XVI. I need you guys to get this part right here for me, right, going down to the bottom. Your notes, please. So protests is going to start to happen again when the National Assembly is not able to take care of the issues of France, right? Now they're at war with Austria and Prussia, which they're not winning. Because nobody will actually prepare for it. A lot of their military forces are in disarray and so forth for it. They still have economic shortages. There's still famine that's happening at this particular point in time, and people are still very angry. So you're going to have political groups known as communes. We call them political parties here inside the United States, right? Commune just means mob. They're going to attack the palace and legislative assemblies. They're going to attack the palace and legislative assemblies, right? And this is a group that's going to force them to actually kill the king. What they wanted, right, was basically for the National Assembly to give out universal male suffrage. All men get the right to vote, no matter what the case is. All right. Is everybody still copying this down?
Cruel deaths by drawing and quartering, hanging, drowning, and burning at the stake.
Well, under the old regime, there was a whole panoply of very gruesome punishments.
All right, you guys need to get this last bullet point right here down for me, please. So, powers now going to pass from the assemblies, right, the National Assembly, to the commune. So things are starting to change. Which has changed from the National Assembly to the commune is started what's known as Great Fear or the Terror, right? So terrorism, I'm fairly sure you guys all know what terrorism is, right? Terrorism is when you're trying to use fear, the threat of violence, the threat of basically threat of violence, threat of death, blah blah blah, right? To try and get political change in some way or form. Good example of that is what happened last January 6th, 9/11, so on and so forth, right? Same thing here. The Paris communes are going to start using fear, right, anger, so forth, to try and seek out political power and to get and basically to get political change here, right? These members who's going to use fear for political change is going to sound culottes, right? Ordinary patriots without fine clothes are basically people who wear pants for the most part and not short pants. Basically, are common people. All right, and then we're going to move into the Paris Commune and the Reign of Terror, tomorrow. Before I forget, right? If you weren't here last Friday, you do have an assignment that's in Schoology in 121 folder. There's actual instructions right here for it, right? Make sure you guys take a look at the instructions. All it is a video that tells you what to do for your assignment and so forth, right? Make sure you guys turn in your homework. There's a lot of people who are now failing because you failed to turn in your social contract assignment, and also I haven't graded the primary document analysis packet. But there's a ton of people who have failed to turn that in also. Make sure you guys get your homework and so forth turned in, please.